Hello everyone. Now we will be doing another example from chapter 4. So if you have your textbook, please check the same page number 222, and we will solve the problem E421A. So let's read the problem. Holiday Industries manufactures a variety of custom products. The company has traditionally used a plant-wide manufacturing overhead rate based on machine hours to allocate manufacturing overhead to its product. The company estimates that it will incur $970,000 in total manufacturing overhead costs in the upcoming year and will use 10,000 machine hours. So far the company has been using the traditional plant-wide rate. It's the one rate that what we did in chapter 3. Now the company figured out that they are experiencing significantly increased waste disposal fees for hazardous waste generated by certain products. And as a result, their profit margins on all products have been negatively impacted. So the company wants to implement an activity-based costing system so that managers know the cost of each product, including its hazardous waste disposal cost. So instead of using one plant-wide rate, now the company decides to figure out the costs for each and every activity. That means they are going to implement ABC costing system or an activity-based costing system. So let's continue reading. Now, if you look at the next page, you will see that a nice, beautiful table is given here. And this table describes different type of activities and the estimated cost of all activities. So we see they have three activities. One is machine maintenance, another is engineering change, another is hazardous waste disposal. And for each activity, they have total amount of estimated cost. And these costs are driven by some specific allocation base or cost driver. For example, for machine maintenance, the cost is driven by how many hours the company runs the machine. For the engineering change orders, the cost is driven by how many times they actually change their orders. And the hazardous waste disposal cost is determined by how much or the pounds of hazardous materials that the company generates. So the company also estimates the total amount of allocation base or cost driver for every activity. And then they gave you a certain job number, which is job 356. And for that job, the company actually used these little table, these information. So for job 356, they used 290 pounds of direct materials, and that cost $35 per pound. For their labor, they used 20 direct labor hours, and $20 is their labor wage rate. They also used 60 machine hours, 9 change orders, and 60 pound of hazardous waste they generated for this specific job. Now what we need to do, we have three requirements. First, we're going to calculate the cost of job 356 using the traditional or plant-wide manufacturing overhead rate. That means we will be using the formula that we learned in chapter 3, one plant-wide rate. Second, we need to calculate the total cost of job 356, but instead of using one plant-wide traditional overhead rate, we will be using different rates based on different activities. That means to determine our manufacturing overhead cost, we will be using activity-based costings. And then in our requirement 3, we will make some comments and which cost estimation method is actually giving us more useful information. So let's try to do that. So now we are going to do our next problem, which is problem number E421A. Again, I'm using my own computer to record the problem. And let's try to do our first requirement 1. So for requirement 1, we will be using one traditional plant-wide overhead rate. That means this formula. So if we need to determine this overhead rate, we know the formula is total estimated manufacturing overhead cost divided by total estimated amount of allocation base. That means instead of considering the cost of every activities, we will consider the total amount of estimated overhead costs, which is actually given in our previous page. So here, if you read the first paragraph, it says what is the total estimated overhead cost? That's $970,000. And then it also mentioned what is the total estimated amount of allocation base, which is 10,000 machine hours. So now we will be using this information to calculate one company-wide or plant-wide predetermined overhead rate. So let's plug in the numbers. Predetermined manufacturing overhead rate will be our total estimated manufacturing overhead cost, which we just found $970,000. And then we will divide it by our total estimated amount of the allocation base. So in this problem, their allocation base is machine hours. And the total amount, of course, is estimated, is given. It's 10,000 machine hours. So now we will we'll divide it by 10,000 machine hours. I'm writing MH. MH stands for machine hours. So our predetermined manufacturing overhead rate is 970,000 divided by 10,000, which will give you $97 per machine hour. Now this is the one plant-wide rate they will be using to estimate or to allocate their overhead costs. So if we go to the next page, you'll see the requirement is asking to calculate the cost of job 356. Remember, we need to calculate the total cost of this job. So for a specific job, the total manufacturing cost means 3 types of costs. It's of course, their overhead cost, but in addition to that, we need to calculate their direct material cost and direct labor cost. So first, let's try to calculate their overhead cost using this predetermined rate. So for this job, manufacturing overhead cost of job 356 will be this predetermined rate, which we just calculated, $97 per machine hour, multiplied by the actual amount of machine hours that the company used for this specific job. So if we look back here, the actual information table for job 356, we will find that they actually spend 60 machine hours for this job. So for every machine hour, the cost is $97 and they actually use 60 machine hours. So our manufacturing overhead cost of this job, job number 356, will be $97 times 60. And please check with your calculator, and that will give you $5,820. So now we just got our overhead cost portion, but the requirement is asking to calculate the entire cost of job 356. So the cost of job 356 means three types of costs, right? It means direct material cost, plus its direct labor cost, plus manufacturing overhead cost. MOH means manufacturing overhead cost. And we just got that by using this one plant-wide or traditional manufacturing overhead rate. Our manufacturing overhead cost is $5,820. Now we need to check the two other types of costs. So if we plug in the numbers, we will find that for this certain job, our direct material cost will be how much material they actually use and what is the cost of those materials. So if you actually look at here, their actual table for this job 356, the company actually used 290 pounds of direct material, and for each pound the cost is $35. So to know the direct material cost, we need to multiply these two, 290 pounds, of direct material multiplied by the cost per pound, which is given here, $35. That means it will be 290 multiplied by 35. I can write it LB for pounds. So this is our direct material cost. Now to know the direct labor cost, we have to check how many hours they actually used for this job. So they used 20 direct labor hours, and the cost is, the wage rate is $20 per hour. So their direct labor cost will be 20 hours, 20 labor hours multiplied by the cost of this per labor hour, which is $20 per labor hour. This is how you can calculate your direct material cost and direct labor cost. All the information, all are given here. You just need to plug in the correct number. And then we need to plug in or add this manufacturing overhead cost with what we just calculated here, which is $5,820. Right, so this is our manufacturing overhead, and we actually showed it here how we got this cost. So this is the manufacturing overhead cost. So I'm just highlighting in case you would be interested to know again. So now the total cost means direct material cost, direct labor cost, and manufacturing overhead cost. There's three types of costs. For this job, all this information we just use, and if you add these three, you will find that the total cost for this job 365, will be, so the direct material cost 290 multiplied by 35. So please check with your calculator. I have my calculator and I'm calculating, and I got 10,150. Direct labor cost is very simple, 20 times 20, which is $400. And overhead, we actually calculated, we just plugged in the numbers, which is $5,820. So these are the three components of your cost. Now, if you add these three, so your total cost is 10,150 plus 400 plus 5,820, which gives me that the total cost of job 356 is $16,370. I'm requesting that all of you will be using your calculator and you will also calculate all those numbers. So this is the cost of this job 356 when the company is using the traditional plant-wide manufacturing overhead rate. Now we're gonna do the same thing, but instead of using one plant-wide manufacturing overhead rate, we will be using different rates for different activities. That means we're gonna use our activity-based costing system, which is the requirement number 2. So we'll be using the same information, just for our manufacturing cost, it will be different. So let's try to do our second requirement number 2, where we have to use ABC costing or activity-based costing. So first we need to calculate the rates for every activity. So you remember we did the same thing. If you go back our previous problem, we did the same thing for every activity. We need to look at the total estimated cost and total estimated allocation base and the rates. So every information you will find here for different activity costs and their allocation base. So we will be using this information, and for this problem we have 3 activities. We will figure out 3 rates. So let's try to use this table and calculate the rates for every activity. And I'm going to do the same type of table. First we're going to show activities, and then total estimated costs, and then we will using our estimated allocation base, and then we will figure out our cost allocation rate. So this is our little mini table that we are trying to do, and these are the headlines, and then we will try to figure out every activity. So our first activity is machine maintenance. So machine maintenance, the total estimated cost, it's given here from this first table. It's given here, it's actually $400,000. So we have to divide it by their total amount of allocation base or cost driver. Remember, cost driver and allocation base both are same. And we see that for our first activity, which is machine maintenance, our total amount of allocation base is 10,000. 10,000, it's actually machine hours. So we will divide it by 10,000 machine hours, and it gives us the rate, which is 400,000 divided by 10,000, which is $40 per machine hour. It's very straightforward. You can easily calculate it. $40 per machine hour. I'm writing MH. MH stands for machine hour. Our second activity is engineering change orders. So engineering change orders, and the total estimated cost is 150,000. It's given again, 150,000, and we know our cost driver is number of change order, and the total number of change order, which is also estimated, it's 3,000 orders, change orders. So if we divide this $150,000 divided by 3,000, it gives us that for every change order, the cost will be $50. 150,000 divided by 3,000, which gives $150. So the cost will be $150 per change. Our last activity is hazardous waste disposal. And we just see it from this table that the total estimated cost is for $20,000, and the cost is driven by the pound of hazardous material they actually generate, and the total amount estimated, it will be 1,500 pounds. 1,500 pounds. So here, if we use this pounds of, it's actually hazardous, pounds of hazardous materials. So if you would like, you can write the entire thing, but I hope you understand. And if you divide this for 20,000 by 1,500, you will find that the cost is $280 for per pound of hazardous materials. That means if the company produces 1 pound of hazardous materials, the cost will be, the disposal cost will be $280. And that's the major issue, that they really would like to check it, this hazardous disposal, waste disposal cost for every job. Now, if we know all these three rates, we can calculate the manufacturing overhead cost of this specific job, which is job 356, and this time we will be using these specific rates, and we'll be using their actual amount of allocation base of this job 356, which is given here. So now let's try to calculate the manufacturing overhead cost of job 356, and we'll be using these all three rates. So for our first activity, which is machine maintenance, the rate is $40 per machine hour. So let's take a look at this table. how many machine hours they actually used for these jobs. So for job 356, they used 60 machine hours. So this is their actual allocation base. So I will multiply this rate by their actual allocation base, which means $40 per machine hour multiplied by our actual machine hour is 60. So 60 machine hour. So this will be the cost for our first activity, which is machine maintenance. Now for the second activity, engineering change order, the rate is $150 per change. And if we check here, the main table, they actually have 9 change orders. So if we multiply this rate and multiply it by 9 change order, then we will figure out our engineering change order cost. And our last item is here, hazardous waste disposal cost. And we found that the cost rate is $280 per pound of hazardous disposal. So hazardous materials per pound of hazardous materials. And let's check it. For this job 356, they actually generated 60 pounds of hazardous waste material. So their cost of those disposal costs will be $280 multiplied by 60 pounds. 60 pounds of hazardous materials. These are the 3 activities, and we used all those specific rate, and then we multiplied by their actual allocation base. So if we do this, I'm trying to give a better shape for this part. So if I calculate all those numbers for the first part, we have $40 times 60, which will give you $2,400. So our machine maintenance cost is $2,400. Our engineering change order cost is 150 times 9, which actually will give you, here it's there is a typo, it's actually $50 per order. The engineering change order cost is 150,000 divided by 3,000, so it will actually give you per change cost, it's actually $50, not 150. I'll apologize for this typo. It's $50 multiplied by 9 change order. And if we do so, we will find that our engineering change order cost is $450. Then our hazardous waste disposal cost, the rate was 280, and we multiplied by our actual amount of hazardous, which is 60. So if you multiply this 280 multiplied by 60, let me check it, it will give you the number $16,800. $16,800. And then if we add all these 3 activity costs, 2,400, 450, and 16,800, please do the calculations with me. And I found manufacturing overhead cost of job 356 is $19,650 when the company is using activity-based costing. So now we need to find out what is the total cost. Total cost of job 356. It's the same what we did before. Right, so we need to calculate all three costs. Total cost means direct material costs. I'm writing every detail so that you can check it out later. Direct material costs, direct labor costs, and our manufacturing overhead cost. So we just figure out this is our manufacturing overhead cost when you use activity-based costing, and the two other costs, which are direct material and direct labor, we have the information, and those will be the same for our requirement 1. So for direct material cost, we used 290 pound of direct material. Per pound cost is $35. We actually did it, but still I'm showing you 290 pounds of direct material, and each pound costs $35. So this will be your direct material cost. Direct labor cost, for this job we use 20 direct labor hours and the wage rate is $20. That means it's 20 direct labor hour. I can write it down LHR labor hour, and you can multiply that. The wage rate is $20 per labor hour. So this is our direct labor cost portion. And the overhead cost, we actually calculated it. So I can just plug in the number from here, which is 19,650. Now check the two other numbers. If you have your calculator, please do the calculations with me. So our direct material cost is 290 multiplied by 35, and we actually did it before. I found 10,150. This is our direct material cost. Direct labor is very simple, 20 times 20. So direct labor cost is 400 plus our overhead cost, which is 19,650. Now, if we add all these three, we will find that the total cost of job 356 when we are using this ABC costing system is this 10,150. Let me do the calculation, plus 400 plus 19,650, which gives me the total cost. It's $30,200. So you see the difference. When you have used the activity-based costing, the cost is $30,200. But on the other hand, when we use the plant-wide rate, one rate for our manufacturing part, the cost was $16,370. So here requirement number 3 is asking which method will give you more useful information. Of course, this activity-based costing will give you better, precise information, because if you have different jobs, you can check for every job the problem that the company is dealing, which is their waste disposal costs, and we can figure it out which job actually incurs higher costs and the reasons for that. So if you use traditional rate, you see you are kind of doing under costing. But when we use more precise activity-based rates, the cost is actually higher. So this is how we can calculate the cost of any specific job by using activity-based costing. I hope you already practiced these problems with me, and I also assigned 2 other problems for your homework. So please do problem number E431B and E432B, because next week we will have our first exam, and the exam will be on chapter 2, 3, and 4. Thank you very much for your time and patience today.